Welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since I last spoke with you all, but I didn't want to close out the year without providing you with a bit more content here. For this particular episode, I want to talk with you a little bit about five Linux distributions that I've used over the years and that I've also used and installed on other people's computers and have had really good luck with. So these are my top Linux distros, really for folks who simply just want to get things done. They don't have time to tinker with things, just get it installed, get the applications they need installed, and just use their computers. So let's get going. Okay, here's the criteria that I used when selecting these particular Linux distributions. And do keep in mind that these are in no particular order of significance. So the first one is related to hardware compatibility. And what I mean by this really are a couple of things. Over the years, I've installed Linux on various make and model computers. And that also includes Intel-based Macs. The particular distributions that I've chosen here honestly have caused me the least amount of headache when getting them set up, installed and set up for the users. And I've gone through at least a dozen different Linux distributions, all of which had either, some minor issues or none at all. And I had a few of them that just didn't work no matter what I tried. I normally install it also on very old computers. I do get requests from folks who have computers that are over a decade old to either, they usually ask me, do I get rid of this thing? What do I do? I can't upgrade Windows on it. That's too slow, so forth, and not enough memory, what have you. And what I tell them is, I said, well, as long as the machine's fully functional, it's worth giving it a try. Let's give Linux a go here. So I've got one distribution here in particular that I think you guys are gonna really appreciate because I've found that it works on the vast majority of the older computers that I've encountered. In fact, I just installed it on a 15-year-old HP laptop. Kept my fingers crossed and got it up and running in pretty much no time flat. There was one minor caveat, and I'll talk to you guys about that shortly. The next thing is, of course, the learning curve. And essentially, that's how easy it was for that user to get up and going with minimum hand-holding from me. The third one is available applications. Now, nowadays, you'd be pretty hard-pressed to find a modern Linux distro that does not support app images, Flatpaks, or even snaps. And even with that, many of those have their own software library. So of the five that I have here that we're going to talk about today, they all support, you can have snap support, app image support, Flatpaks, plus they have each of them have a very extensive software center that you can install your applications from as well. Next would be ease of setup. Essentially, how easy is it for a new user, if they want to install the OS themselves, how easy is it for them to do that? And does it have the desired applications that they want, and how easy it is to get those up and running? And finally, personal experience, and this is really related to my own personal experience setting these up on both newer and older computers. Now, I want to share what I'm calling a quick pro tip for those of you who may encounter issues trying to get Linux installed on older hardware. Now, when I say older hardware, I typically mean computers that are over 12 years old. Now, what I've encountered in the past with some older computers is that they don't recognize booting from a USB drive. No matter what I tried, including making sure that the BIOS was configured to allow booting from USB, it simply would not work. However, these older laptops have always had a DVD drive built in. So what I ended up doing was using an open source application called Brasero. That's Brasero. And you'll find it in practically all the Linux repositories. Ubuntu has it, Debian has it, I think Fedora has it, what have you. And you can use it to burn the Linux ISO onto a DVD. And using the DVD drive built into the laptop, you can then boot into Linux. From there, I simply install the OS from DVD. So yes, a good old-fashioned DVD saves the day. Now keep in mind that the install process is much slower than that of a USB drive, but hey, once Linux is installed, then you're good to go. So I bought an external USB DVD drive with read-write capabilities some years ago, and I use it for times like this. Now, if you have Windows installed or Mac OS, I know that there's DVD burning software for those two operating systems, and I do apologize. I can't really think of the name of any right now because I rarely use those two operating systems. But you can kind of search the internet and see what utilities are available for those two operating systems that will allow you to burn a Linux ISO to a DVD. Oh, and in terms of cost, you can purchase an external USB-based DVD drive with read-write capabilities online for under $20 US. Okay, so the first distribution that I want to talk about is called Lubuntu. Lubuntu is really good for both newer as well as older hardware. This is pretty much my de facto go-to standard when I'm upgrading old hardware. I think most recently I mentioned I upgraded a 2008 model HP laptop using Lubuntu, and it worked just fine. It's a very lightweight distribution, and let's take a look at it right quick. Okay, so here's the Lubuntu desktop. As you can see, it's nice and clean and very customizable. The desktop environment is called LXQT, and it uses the OpenBox window manager. Now I've gone ahead and made the icons and the text a little bit larger to make it easier for you to see things. As its name implies, Lubuntu is based on Ubuntu 22.04.3 LTS edition. So the first thing I want to show you is the memory footprint or memory use of Lubuntu. I'm going to open up the terminal here, and it's called QTerm. We'll open that up here, and we'll go into HTOP. HTOP, and let me make this a little bit bigger here so it'll be a little bit easier for you to read. There we are. So as you can see, the memory footprint, this is right after boot up, of Lubuntu is right about 550 megabytes. Now I know what some of you are thinking here. Hey, there are a number of other very lightweight Linux distributions out there that I could have gone with that use even less memory than what Lubuntu does, and you'd be correct with that. However, recall that earlier in this episode, two of the criteria that I mentioned were the learning curve and available applications. And believe me when I tell you that I've tried other lightweight distributions such as Puppy Linux and Antix, and for whatever reason, Lubuntu has yielded the least amount of hand-holding when showing new users how to navigate around the system. Plus, those users really like using the Discover, and I'll show you that in a moment, software center for installing applications. Okay, so let's open up Discover. Now Discover, let's see if I get it loaded here, is essentially the software center for Lubuntu. And this is where you go, or the application that you open up when you're ready to search for software that you want to install and install it from here. You can also uninstall software. So by default, you'll get this list of featured applications, and this list will change over time. So as you scroll through the different featured applications, if you find one that you're interested in, let's say, I don't know, Krita, for example, digital painting and creative freedom, click on this. It tells you a little bit about Krita from the Krita Foundation. The number of ratings, 725 ratings have been entered for it. I'll maximize this for you a bit. You get a few screenshots of the software that you can scroll through. I think there are only 3 here. There is a basic write-up on it, so you can read a little bit about what Krita. I actually use Krita here at the channel. In fact, it's a really good paint program. And you also get some various reviews of the product here. And I can tell you it works very, very well for me. So let's go ahead and we'll get this installed. Before we do that, we click on the Sources button here. Ubuntu, because it's based on Ubuntu, depending on the application you choose, will have one or two different install options, or the libraries where you can install it from. So by default, the Ubuntu repository is selected here. But if you want the Snap version of Krita, let's say we choose Snap, right? So this will install the Snap version of Krita. So let's do that here. We'll click the install link, put the password. If I get that correct here. And then the install will kick off here. So while that's running, let's navigate around a little bit here in the Discover Software Center. So if you notice here, you've got two different links: Plasma add-ons, applications. Let's click on this, the applications. So here's a list of the other various applications that are available. My screen resized there for some reason. Anyway, we'll keep moving on. The applications available to you, and again, you can click on each one as you desire and pull up some information about it. And if you want to try it out, you can either go to Sources, choose which source you want to download and install it from, and you can install it. There's accessibility, accessories, different developer tools. You can go back, educational software. Stellarium is a very popular application here, a desktop planetarium solution that's available for Ubuntu and various other distributions. And we're almost done with the install of Krita. We'll take a look at that in a moment here. There are various internet tools. So if you want to do internet chat, like here's a Telegram app right here. You can search for software. Let's see if we can find, I don't know, let's look for Signal and see if Signal's on here. I don't know that it is. Yeah, I don't see it in the list. Let's look for OBS. Search for OBS. Here it is. Okay, so we've got OBS Studio. You can click that link, and right now there's only one one source where you can install it from, and I'm not sure exactly which one that is. Let's see if it tells us. I don't think it's the Flatpak or... Yeah, so the source is from the Ubuntu repositories. There are different desktop add-ons. Here we go. We'll go back and clear that out. Different Plasma widgets that you can install to customize your desktop environment. And overall, it's Discover is not a bad tool. Again, I've shown it to pretty much everyone whose laptops I've upgraded with Ubuntu, and they like it and they use it frequently. So let's close out of this and we'll go take a look to see if Krita has been installed. So Krita is a graphics program. So we should see it listed here in the graphics menu, and it is. So let's click on that. Get Krita to open up, version 5.2.2. And what I noticed about Krita, the first time you start it up, whether it's from the Ubuntu repository or a Flatpak or from a Snap package, it takes it a bit of time. But once you've got it open that first time and initializes, it's pretty quickly from there on. All right, so this is the Krita user interface, and this is the one I use as well. So we'll close out of Krita. Now, we can actually uninstall Krita too. So if we go back to Discover, and I'll just type Discover here, and we go to Installed Apps, we sort by name, and we'll scroll down. We'll look for Krita. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. Uninstall, and it tells you it's the Snap version that we installed. Click on Remove, put the password, press Enter, and it'll start removing Krita from your system. So installing software and uninstalling software on Linux nowadays is painfully simple, and that's what I like about it. So now that it's been removed, we'll close that. We'll go here, back to graphics, and Krita is now gone. So this isn't a in-depth review of Lubuntu, but I did want to share with you that this is pretty much my big go-to when it comes to installing especially on older computers, but I have installed it on some pretty modern computers for folks as well, and it works great. In fact, those folks who have newer computers and just want a very simple, easy to use Linux that eats up very little system resources with a lot of software in its repository, Lubuntu is definitely the way to go. So this is my number one pick for lightweight Linux desktop environments. Next up on the list is Pop! OS. Now, Pop! OS is a very popular Linux distro that's also based on Ubuntu. However, System76, who makes Pop! OS, they've gone that extra mile to really customize the user experience. And I believe they've done a really good job with it. So let's take a quick look at Pop! OS. Okay, here we are in Pop! OS. Pop! OS is based on Ubuntu 22.04 LTS edition. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the features here in Pop! OS, but I will touch on a few features that many of the users I've introduced Pop! OS to seem to really like. First is the general layout of the home screen. Things are nicely laid out, such as accessing workspaces by doing what? Clicking on workspaces. Also, same for applications. You want to look at the applications in your application list. You click on applications, and essentially they're nicely grouped. So you have this library home. Let me close out of workspaces for you right quick. And we'll look at applications. But these are the different folders. You can also create your own folders and place applications in there if you want to. Let's say you have a group of applications that you always use. You can create a folder, give it a name, and then essentially drag those applications into that custom folder. But the way Pop has it laid out for you, if you click on, let's say, Office, you'll see all of your Office-related software. So we've got LibreOffice installed here, and this is the full LibreOffice. It has, well, actually, it's everything except the database. So I take that back. It's not the full LibreOffice. It's missing LibreOffice Base, but that's the only thing it's missing. All right, so you've got your system utilities, other utilities here, such as your document scanner, the extensions. You can show workspaces here if you want to. It's a whole bevy of things that you have available to you. Now, if we want to look at, how do you install software, so that's something else that a lot of users like. We go to something called the Pop Shop, and this is the Pop Shop. The Pop Shop has all of the applications broken down into these various groupings, and of course, just like we saw with Lubuntu, with its featured apps, Pop! OS has some featured applications as well. So they call them Pop Picks essentially. Just took a moment for it to load here. So installing software is pretty much as easy as we saw with Discover on Lubuntu. Let's say we want to put the Chromium web browser, for example. Simple as one-click install, and the install process begins. And you'll see it here. So while that's happening, let's scroll through the Pop Shop a little bit more. Oh yeah, while it's doing that, if we click here and we want to look at the different system software sources or updates and installed software, this provides you with a list of software that's already installed. And if any of them needed to be updated, you would see a link on this side here, essentially called Update. You would click on that, and then the Pop Shop would begin updating that software. Okay, so Chromium's been installed. Let's close out of this, and we'll go into Applications. We could have done that here too. I just did it from the dock, and there's the Chromium browser. So we open up Chromium browser. We'll give it a moment to open up here. And there's a Chromium browser available to you too. Let's go to, I don't know, I think it's system76.com. So it's the System76 website. And we can click on Pop! OS. And this is where you can actually download and install and set up Pop! OS for install on your device. Now, by default, Firefox is the web browser that's included with Pop! OS. Same as with Lubuntu. I didn't show you that, but in Lubuntu, Firefox is also the default web browser, and this is the web browser that I prefer using as well. Right, so this is Firefox. Another thing that users like is this tiling feature that Pop! OS has. So if we click this little icon here, we enable tile windows. Watch what happens when I start opening up different programs. So this is the File Explorer. We'll open up the terminal next. Notice how the Pop! OS is beginning to tile these windows side by side. Let's open up the Pop Shop. And we'll open up, I don't know, settings. So this is how the tiling manager works, and you can customize this if you so choose. But you can drag and drop things, right? So we want to move things around, for example, and it creates a nice little a tab grouping for you on the fly. And I really do like this about well, with respect to Pop! OS. So that's the tiling manager. And a lot of people seem to like this. I use it a little bit, but I more prefer, having my windows overlap like this. I'm a bit more traditional when it comes to that. But these are some of the features of Pop! OS that people really like. It has an extensive software library. Again, it uses the Ubuntu software library. It does not have snaps or Flatpaks built into it, but you can include them. Let me check Flatpaks. I'm not too sure about that one. Let's see here. Make sure Flatpak. Yeah, so Flatpak's not there. Snap. Yep. So it doesn't have that either. Let's see if it has it. So Flatpak is installed. I take that back. Flatpak is installed by default, but snaps are not. As you can see here, we do have a few Flatpaks. The Chromium web browser was installed as a Flatpak. So I didn't realize that. I just learned that today. Flatpak by default is installed, and you have access to Flatpaks here. Let's open up go back home, the Pop Shop. Let's see what other Flatpaks they have. Let's look for Kdenlive. We'll do a search for that. Let's see. Yeah, so you can choose the Flatpak edition or the Ubuntu Deb. What do you know about that? That's interesting. I didn't realize that Flatpak was included by default with this version of Pop! OS. So that's good. But if you want snaps, obviously you have to install Snapd. In terms of system resource utilization, I've already opened up a few things, but let's run HTOP and see where we are right now. So about 2.07 gig. I can tell you from boot up with Pop! OS, it's about a little over 1.2 gig by default. But since I've opened and closed a few things, particularly these two browsers, that has eaten up a bit more of the memory. So yeah, these are some of the features that I've found that users who I've introduced Pop! OS to really like. The tiling feature, the way the desktop is laid out. It has a really nice search capability here. So if you're looking for, I don't know, let's see if we can look for printers, for example. You just start typing the word print and you click on printers, and here's where you can go to install printers. But things are very well nicely laid out here in Pop! OS, and a lot of people really do like it, and I like it as well. So this is Pop! OS. Okay, so this one will likely come as a surprise to some of you. I've always been a fan of Fedora. However, the one challenge I've had with Fedora over the years is that depending on your hardware, Fedora may or may not detect some of it. Now, some examples that have impacted me over the years with Fedora are with it not detecting such things as my Wi-Fi chipset or even my audio. And that's due to the fact that Fedora adopts a much stricter non-proprietary stance, when it comes to the software that's included by default. Now don't get me wrong, it's not difficult once you've added something like, let's say, RPM Fusion, which in most cases, gets Fedora to recognize your hardware. but to a new user, it can be a bit frustrating. And I've seen new users go through that frustration as well when getting Fedora installed. So I started looking around. I know that Fedora had a lot of spins, and I happened across this particular Fedora-based distribution called Ultramarine Linux. And Ultramarine, surprisingly, handles these issues quite well. According to their website, Ultramarine applies what they call more of a pragmatic tweaks and settings to make sure that the out-of-box experience is as smooth as it can be by trying to make sure that you'll be able to get started as quickly as possible. And to do that, they do a very good job at making sure that Ultramarine detects your hardware and configures it for you during installation. And that's really important for somebody that's coming into Linux brand new. Now, while your mileage may vary, I can attest to the fact that it does work quite well on various computers, because I've tried it on different computers where Fedora has some challenges. So let's take a quick look at Ultramarine Linux. Okay, so here we are in Ultramarine Linux. It uses the Budgie desktop environment, and Budgie is one of my favorite desktop environments. This particular release of Ultramarine is based on Fedora 39, which was released, I think, about a little over a month, maybe a month or so ago, from the time of this recording of this episode. Now, the Budgie desktop bears some similarities with the LXQT desktop offered by Lubuntu that we saw earlier, such as you can see here the application menu. Now, while Lubuntu focuses more on simplicity, Budgie, in my opinion, offers a much more modern user experience, and surprisingly, it really does this by using only a couple hundred megabytes more of memory than does Lubuntu, believe it or not. Now, I have gotten Ultramarine to run on older hardware before, but I found that Lubuntu is still the better choice on older, slower computers, as Lubuntu seems to respond a little bit better than does Ultramarine. Give it a try. That's my recommendation. Give it a try. If it works really well on your older computer, then I would suggest going with Ultramarine. Something to keep in mind about Ultramarine Linux is that, unlike the other 4 distros that I'm covering in this episode, Ultramarine, being based on Fedora, is, number 1, based on Fedora and not Ubuntu, and number 2, Fedora, and as such Ultramarine, will receive more frequent updates than will Ubuntu-based distributions. Not that either is necessarily a bad thing, but it is something to keep in mind. So each version of Fedora and its derivatives are supported for a period of, I think it's 13 months from the time of that version's release, whereas with the Ubuntu LTS-based distros, they're supported for 5 years, as each Ubuntu LTS, and LTS stands for Long-Term Support Edition, is supported for 5 years from its respective release date. All right, so let's start by looking at the Software Center here. Okay, here's the Software Center. All right, so the Software Center more closely resembles that of the Pop! OS Pop Shop. It's nicely segmented into feature apps, as you see here. App categories, you have Editor's Choice, new and updated, and other categories. You can search for apps, essentially. You click here and you type in, let's go to OBS again. And you can click on the application. It brings up some details about OBS. And depending on the application, you can choose to install either the Flatpak edition, or you can get the version from the Fedora repository. Now, removing software, let me back out of this right quick. Removing software is just as simple. You click on this install button here at the top, And the list of installed software appears right here in your listing. And if you want to remove any, you can simply click on the uninstall button, like so. Click uninstall, and it'll remove the software for you. Now, the Budgie desktop settings is another feature that I really like. If we go here to Budgie desktop settings, so Budgie desktop settings is where you go to further customize any settings that you wish for the Budgie desktop. Let me expand that out a bit. You have your different styles available to you. You can change things on the fly. If you don't like the particular icons, you want to change the icons. See the icons change there. Let's try a few of these others here. Fluent, gray, dark. See what that looks like. And see any changes. Let's see. We'll try something else. Fluent green. Ooh, fluent pink. That's interesting. Fluent red. What does that look like? Let's go back to hydrogen. Fluent round gray. Fluent, so many of them in here. Fluent light. Looks like some minor changes. Different cursors. So we can go to add WITA or to the hydrogen cursor. Notifications, you can position them on the bottom right, top left, top right, bottom left. You can go from dark theme to light theme. You can enable animations. Here are your desktop settings. So if you want to enable or disable desktop icons, you can do that here. If you want to get rid of the trash can or the home directory, you can do that too. What else do we have here? Fonts. So you can adjust. I've done that here already to make the screen a little bit easier for you to read and see. So you can adjust your different fonts here and the font sizes. The Raven menu, this is a hallmark of the Budgie desktop here. So your notifications would appear here. These are different widgets that would appear in your Raven menu. So that's your Raven menu. You can customize your button layouts. So right now, the buttons for each one of the windows on the left, similar to a Mac, you can move that over to the right if you're more comfortable with it that way. When a new application opens, you can have it open centered on the screen, like this, for example. Or we can turn that off, and it'll open up, typically left justified. So we enable that. Your panel down here, you can customize what appears on this panel. You can move things around. You can even add additional panels to the Budgie desktop. And if there are any applications that you want to automatically start when you log in, you can add those here as well. Right? So you can choose from your list of applications. So let's say you want the calculator to always open up. When you log into the Budgie desktop, the calculator will automatically start. I think you can do it with LibreOffice, for example. So if you're a writer and you're always using LibreOffice Writer, you can have LibreOffice Writer start up automatically when you log in. Now, keep in mind that while there is an official spin of Fedora that does include the Budgie desktop, where Ultramarine sets itself apart is really based on what I stated earlier. Ultramarine includes the RPM Fusion and necessary drivers to detect your hardware during install time. So I would suggest you give both of them a try. You can go to the Fedora website, click on Spins, and choose the Budgie Desktop Edition and install that. Or you can go to Ultramarine directly at their website, and I think it's, let me bring it up right quick for you here. Let's look at the Ultramarine site. Let's do that. Let's do that. We'll do Ultra, if I can type, and I can't seem to type today. We'll do a quick search for it. Here it is. So here's the Ultramarine Linux site. If we do Fedora, I think it's getfedora.org. Yep. If we scroll all the way down here to where it says Spins on the Fedora website, you'll see the different desktop environments that Fedora provides installs for, but here's Budgie at the bottom. All right, so this is the Fedora Budgie spin of the Fedora Budgie desktop. So you can choose to install this one. I think the download link is somewhere here, right? Or you can go to Ultramarine and download it directly from here. I would suggest you compare both. If the Fedora spin of Budgie Desktop works fine for you, then go with that. If not, go with Ultramarine. I find Ultramarine works best for me and on the systems that I've installed it on. So I would personally prefer Ultramarine. So that was a quick look at Ultramarine Linux. So next up is an absolute favorite of mine. While arguably most people who switch to Linux start out with Ubuntu, for me it was Linux Mint that kicked it off. So nowadays Linux Mint comes in two flavors. One is the edition that's based on Ubuntu LTS, and the other, which is known as Linux Mint Debian Edition, is based on, you guessed it, a Debian stable. Now there are some important differences to be aware of between these two editions of Linux Mint, and we're going to talk about those right now. Okay, so here we are logged into the Linux Mint Cinnamon desktop. Now this happens to be the LMDE6 release, the one that's based on Debian that I'm showing you today. And there are three main things that I'm going to point out to you here. First off, and there's a lot to unpack here, so hang tight. The Ubuntu edition of Mint offers 4 different download options from the Linux Mint website, 3 of which are based on different desktop environments. There's the flagship Cinnamon Desktop Edition, which is what we're looking at here. There's the XFCE edition and the Mate edition. Now that 4th option is based on the Cinnamon Desktop, and it's what the Linux Mint refers to as the Linux Mint Cinnamon Edge Edition. It has a newer Linux kernel that offers better support for the latest hardware. And this is where things get to be a bit puzzling to me. See, the Ubuntu edition of Linux Mint ships with the same LTS kernel that Ubuntu LTS shipped with, which was kernel, I think, 5.15. Now, what's a bit confusing about all of this is that the Ubuntu edition of Linux Mint offers users the ability to upgrade to a more recent version of the kernel as well via the Linux Mint Update Manager. So just color me puzzled by this. Why do they need the Edge edition when Linux Mint, the Ubuntu edition, already offers you the ability to upgrade to the newer kernel? Now the Debian edition of Mint, which is what we're looking at here, includes a more recent kernel than the one that was included with the Ubuntu edition of Mint. Now why is that the case? Well, the current LTS version of Ubuntu was released back in April of 2022, while the most recent LTS version of Debian was released this past summer here in 2023, and as such it included a more recent kernel. Now, since its April 2022 release, Ubuntu has been updating the kernel, and it's currently on version, I think, 6.2 if I'm not mistaken. Now secondly, LMDE does offer a greater number of desktop environment installs than does the Ubuntu edition of Mint, because Debian provides support for a multitude of desktop environments, and LMDE inherits this. So let's take a quick look. I'm going to open up the terminal, and I'm going to run a command here. I think it's called cell. We'll log in. If I got it correct, it should open up. So this is an application that's included with Debian, and as such, LMDE has this. And if you notice, you have different desktop environments that you can install on Linux Mint. There's the GNOME Desktop, XFCE, something called GNOME Flashback. I think this is an older version of GNOME. KDE Plasma, we already have Cinnamon installed. The Mate Desktop, LXDE, LXQT is what we looked at when we reviewed Ubuntu. And of course, you can set up to be a web server, SSH server, or there's another desktop called Laptop. So you can choose any number of these for the LMDE edition of Linux Mint, and when you log back in, you reboot the system, you log back. Before you log in, you just choose a different desktop environment, and that's the one that'll come up for you. So I do like this feature. It's not something that the Linux Mint team talks about very much, but it is available because it's a component of Debian Edition. So if you want to try any of these desktops out, it's as simple as using your arrow keys to move down to the one you want, hitting the space bar to check it, and then click OK. We'll tap to OK, let it install, do a reboot, and you're up and running. The software manager for both the Ubuntu edition and LMDE are identical. Both are packed with a very large library of software for you to choose from. Flatpak support is included by default. Let's say we want to search for, I think, Kdenlive. It's a good example. As you'll see, there's both the FlatHub edition as well as the version that's included in the Linux Mint repositories. And typically the difference between those two is really versioning. The one that you'll find in the Linux Mint repositories may be a slightly older version than what the Flatpak offers. If you want snap support, Linux Mint, you have to go to their website, and there's some basic instructions. They're real easy instructions on how to set up snaps support in Linux Mint. So it's not included by default. Now my suggestion between LMDE and Linux Mint Ubuntu editions, because both are excellent, is to simply choose which one you want to go with. My preference is LMDE. In a previous episode, I recommended that the Linux Mint team really focus their efforts solely on LMDE. There's honestly no need for them to continue having dependencies on Ubuntu. And I've always liked Linux Mint. I strongly recommend Linux Mint. So definitely you want to take a look at this release. And now last, but certainly not least, there's Ubuntu. Ubuntu is based on Debian, but adds more customizations to the desktop and includes an additional bevy of software and packages in addition to the already huge library of software offered by Debian itself. Let's dive in and take a quick look at Ubuntu. Ubuntu is arguably the most well-known Linux distribution out there. This is the one distro that all of the others we've talked about today, except for Ultramarine Linux, is based on. This is Ubuntu 22.04 LTS edition. So let's quickly go to the Ubuntu website. Let me bring that up here. And as soon as it comes up, we'll go to the download link. Actually, we're already there. All right, so the Ubuntu website is simply www.ubuntu.com. And you click on Downloads. And in this download, on this download page, what you'll notice is that Ubuntu offers several different installation options. Of course, there's the Ubuntu Desktop, Ubuntu Server, Ubuntu for Internet of Things devices like Raspberry Pis, for example, Ubuntu Cloud Edition, and finally, if we look down here, there are several different Ubuntu flavors. So let's really quickly kind of go through the list, and I may go to the website of a few of them. So let's start with Edubuntu, and I'll click on that one. Edubuntu, a stable, secure, and privacy-conscious option for schools. So if you are an educational institution and you're interested in taking advantage of a free and open source, very powerful free and open source operating system with free and open source educational software, then you may want to definitely check out Edubuntu. It is, Ubuntu underpins it. It's very capable, and there's tons of educational software available for it. There's Kubuntu, which is based on the KDE desktop, Lubuntu, which we looked at earlier. Ubuntu does have a Budgie desktop edition. It does have a Cinnamon desktop edition like Linux Mint does, like Linux Mint comes with. The Kylin edition is more for Chinese users. And there's, of course, Ubuntu Mate, Ubuntu Studio. So if you are an artist, let's say a musical artist, graphics artist, something of that nature, Ubuntu Studio comes jam-packed with a number of different applications and libraries that you can leverage for audio mixing, creating music, video, photographs, images, other things like that. There's the traditional Ubuntu Unity desktop, and then Xubuntu, which is the XFCE edition. So as most of you are already familiar with Ubuntu, I'll just touch the surface here a bit. I've applied all the updates, and the kernel version that's been upgraded to is, I think, version 6.2. Let's take a look at that right quick in the terminal here. Bring that up for you. Yes, so 6.2.0-39 generic is the kernel version for Ubuntu 22.04 LTS edition. Canonical has made a number of improvements to Ubuntu. For example, the initial startup of snap packages has been greatly improved, which is good. In fact, in version, I think it was 18.04, 18.04 and 20.04, it just took an ungodly long time to get snap applications like Firefox and a few others to open up. You'd sit there 15 seconds easily. That has changed dramatically, and it's good to see that they've made those improvements. The Software Center, the Ubuntu Software Center, is not unlike what we saw with Ultramarine Linux. Very similar in layout. You've got your categories and what have you. Just a few differences, maybe aesthetically, but installing software and uninstalling software is just as easy in Ubuntu as it is in any of the other distributions that we looked at today. Overall, Ubuntu, it's Ubuntu. What else can I say? It's got tons of software available, lots of drivers. So if you look, especially now it has a 6.2 kernel that's available. It has support for even newer hardware. So I would encourage people, if you've got a system with, I would say, at least 4 gigs of RAM, at least 4 gigs of RAM, at least a dual-core processor, which most of us already do, then Ubuntu is a great place to start. Again, I'm very much a Linux Mint fan as well. So, Linux Mint is every bit as good, in my opinion, and has just as much software available for it. But any of the distributions, any of these 5 that I touched on today, are a great place for you to start. And if you're helping other users, let's say you're a more experienced Linux user and you want to help someone else to make that move to Linux, my recommendation is start with any of these 5 that we've covered here today. So that's pretty much it, for this episode. I want to thank all of you for joining me today. And I want to personally thank my subscribers. Please hit that like button and subscribe. There will be links in the show notes in case you'd like to try out any of these 5 top distros that I've presented to you today. And until next time, peace.